So welcome everyone to our second ICMCI webinar / seminar series. We have a number of different approaches for you. As we just mentioned, last week we had something where institutes spoke with each other to share best practices. And today this is open to management consultants around the world about advising clients in turbulent times. So of course, simply because of our network, most of our members here will be members of institutes, and welcome to you all, and thank you for joining. To start with, I would like to thank Rima, our executive director, who is also on the line with us. She's been leading this initiative and has done a great job of lining everything up for us. And to Josema, our executive assistant at the Secretariat, she's taking care of all of our logistics and will ensure that all of our logistics are lined up appropriately. This will be a recorded session. All of your microphones have been muted by the system to start. So if you do turn on your microphone to speak, please remember to turn it off again because we want to make sure that we avoid the disruption. With so many people on the line, it would be very easy for us to lose track of everything. Because there are so many of us, and we're at just over 50 now, and I expect, just coming up to 50 now, and I expect a lot more in the next few minutes. Rather than opening the microphones for the Q&A, what I'm suggesting is that if you have any questions or as questions occur to you, please put them into the chat box, and I'll moderate a session at the end with Glenn, who's going to leave enough time for some full discussion, and we'll then take it from there. I would like to welcome our colleague, Glenn Yonemitsu. Glenn is the lead delegate to ICMC, from ICMC Canada, from IMC Canada to ICMC. Sorry, my language is not working so well this morning. We will introduce Glenn in more detail a bit later, just when he wants to speak, because I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview from the ICMCI perspective, and just to set the thinking that we had in terms of this particular webinar. This is an article I came across earlier this week from MIT Sloan. It's a US-based management review journal, and they've been doing a lot of really good research into the pandemic, and there's some good articles there. They, together with McKinsey, have two websites that are really very helpful in terms of information. And the point he was making in this article is that it's going to be a long time for the new normal to return. Hopefully, we're not going to be having a global pandemic again for another 100 years, as it's been about 100 years since the last one. But I think it is a real wake-up call for us as management consultants in terms of major disruptions and how we handle them. Because while no one can be certain when we might have another major health crisis, we can be certain that there will be disruption in the marketplaces as they're coming in the future, whether it's health related or socially related or economically related, or disruption in their industries. You know, think Uber, think GPS systems, think film cameras, all of these things that have been totally disrupted. This is going to continue happening in different industries as we go on. So as management consultants, we really have to prepare for a future that is, in the new normal, more disruptive than it has been, and we can take the lessons that we've learned from this and use them in good sense. In the article, I just refer this to you to read, but he makes 6 points about why the economy is going to take a long time to recover. So it's not going to be the kind of V that many politicians are saying, you know, quick drop off and a quick recovery. And these are the 6 reasons he gives for us. The first one is that even before the pandemic, consumer spending was slowing down. There was some concern by consumers about the economic health of the economies in their countries, and this was reflecting in the global economy. So this pandemic has really exacerbated that. We may start opening the stores and trying to get retail and other operations back to normal, but will the consumers come along? And he makes the point that he thinks it's going to take longer because there will be some nervousness. In addition, many economies are putting in new types of labor market regulation to accommodate this pandemic, but many of those will stay around. So that will slow down the impact of businesses being able to recover. There's the destruction of old business models and the rise of new ones. There's probably no business that hasn't been impacted in some way on this. And as businesses wrestle with what is the new normal, how do we change our business model, how do we move forward, it will take time for them to reestablish themselves. This whole matter of the face-to-face work being disrupted is something that is a big pill for organizations to swallow. On the news this morning, I was seeing that some economies are opening things like shopping malls, but customers are not showing up like they used to be, because there's this, combined with number one, there's this concern about health. When it comes time to getting the workplaces back in place, if we have social distancing in workplaces, what does that mean, and how do you do it? Working on resilience ahead of the next pandemic then therefore becomes really, really important for organizations and for us as management consultants to help them find that way forward. So in summary, they're saying well, Alec Levinson is suggesting that the new economic normal is a long way off. So this topic is really particularly relevant now because it helps us to give some insights into what is happening in the world today, how management consultants are reacting to that, and how we can all learn from each other in terms of moving forward. So I'm soon going to turn it over to Glenn. I already mentioned that he's the lead delegate to ICMC from IMC Canada. He's the former executive director of CMC Canada, so he's very well experienced as a management consultant. He's currently the managing director of high impact firms for BDC Advisory Services, BDC being the Business Development Bank of Canada. So his division is very interested in the success of businesses in Canada. And after the announcement of the pandemic, Glenn was appointed to be chair of a national task force to really investigate how to support businesses during this crisis. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his experiences and sharing that knowledge to us. And do remember, please, to put any comments or questions that you have in the chat box. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to you, Glenn, and perhaps we could start with you talking a bit about your organization and the programs that you operate, and we can move into the main content after that.
Thanks, Dwight, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone around the world. It's a real opportunity to share what we've done, and we thank you for attending. The objective that we have today is for me to share what we did in our practice. It doesn't mean it's the right way to do things, but it was one way. And so I want to share that with you, give you some feedback in terms of how well it worked, and then we'll go from there. But to kick it off, I'd like to give you a little bit of a quick background on the firm I work for. It's called the Business Development Bank of Canada. So correct, we're a development bank, which is different than a commercial bank. Our goal is to help entrepreneurs succeed and grow their companies. We only answer to one shareholder. So as opposed to a bank I worked at 30 years ago, where we were publicly traded and all of us were shareholders, with this one we have only one shareholder, and that's actually the federal government of Canada. But we are arm's length, so we operate we're a crown corporation, but we operate at an arm's length, so we get some general guidelines, but it's up to us to execute and make our plans. We have three distinct business units. So the first is financing, and that business unit primarily offers senior debt. Our second business unit is BDC Capital, and that's a division that includes venture capital and also other forms of debt like subordinated debt, mezzanine financing, and quasi-equity. One thing we have in Canada, we're a small country. We only have 35 million people. So not all of the capital markets have developed the way that we would like, ideally. So that's why BDC Capital actually now is the largest venture capitalist in the country. And the growth and transition capital team that does the quasi-equity, the subordinated debt, they're actually one of the largest in growth equity and growth debt going forward for companies to help them grow. And then I work in the third business unit, which is called advisory services. So within advisory services, we have a number of different practices. We have what I would call a regular consulting practice that offers a broad range of solutions, whether it's operational efficiency, IT selection, revenue enhancement, that sort of thing. But the group I work in and serve as the managing director is called the Growth Driver Program, or sorry, I should correct myself. It's called the High Impact Firms Program. And one of our lead programs that we offer is called the Growth Driver Program. So the rest of this presentation is going to be all about high impact firms and our Growth Driver Program. So just to give you a little bit of an overview on the Growth Driver Program, our program is designed, back a slide, please.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. Sorry about that, Don.
Our role is to be the trusted advisor to the CEO of mid-market companies, because we believe that the CEO of a mid-market private company is the loneliest position in business. If you're the CEO of a large company, you have all sorts of executives. There are other CEOs, you have board members, you have all sorts of people that you can speak to. But when you're the CEO of a mid-market company, you actually are the leader. Everyone looks to you for answers, and you have very few places to turn to. So the main premise of our consulting practice is to become that trusted advisor to the CEO. And our service is to help the CEO manage issues in a high growth firm. So there are three primary areas that we focus on. Number one, we try to develop the CEO as a leader. So as you know, as a company grows, the entrepreneur grows and they make all the key decisions. Normally they're the primary shareholder. And quite often they're the doer as well. So we spend a lot of time focusing on how to move the doer, the leader, from being a doer to actually becoming a leader of people. The second activity is how we help them build a full leadership team. So if they have a controller, a head of manufacturing, maybe a head of sales, we actually help assess the readiness of those executives to grow, to scale up, and whether they have the capability to move to the next level. And if they don't have it, we actually help them recruit and attract and retain other executives that will help that company expand their bandwidth. And finally, we help them develop and implement a growth strategy for the firm. So you might think that we just focus on that third part, building the strategy. We actually believe the most important part is actually working on the CEO as a leader. Because you can have the best plans, but without the best plans, or with the best plans, you could have a weak leadership team and they'll never make the numbers work. The numbers will be a fairy tale. But you can actually have a mediocre plan, but if you have a good leader and leadership team, they'll actually find a way to make it work. So we actually focus on the leadership specifically. Now, unlike most other crown corporations or government services, where they offer a product and everybody has an equal shot at getting service from that, our program is different. Our program is kind of like a dating service. The clients have got to want into our program, but we actually have to want to deal with them. So it's actually a matchmaking service. And we have certain criteria that we use to evaluate whether those clients come into our program. One of which is growth ambition, another which is size, and the absolute most important criteria is the attitude of the CEO. And if we have a CEO who believes that they know everything about their business and industry, and there's no one else that actually understands how to run their business because it's so complex, we actually turn around and run the other way. We actually want to deal with CEOs who actually believe that there's an opportunity and a path to get better, that they can develop. They could go on a journey of discovery. And then the final thing I'll tell you about our program is we actually did not go out to hire consultants. We believe that the CEOs of mid-market companies would only trust the advice that comes from people who've been through that themselves. People who have scars on their back. People who can say, been there, done that. So the advisors we hired are former entrepreneurs and C-suite executives. And then we've taught them how to be advisors. So they have incredible credibility when it comes to working with the CEO. But as you can appreciate, we certainly do not take the whole skill of advising lightly. So we've actually been training them on how to become the best advisors possible. And the support team that we provide, we've actually run them through the CMC training. Next slide, please. So everything at the start of March was going swimmingly, perfect. We were 1 month away from our year end. We've had a record year. We achieved every single metric that was laid out in front of us. And we didn't just beat it, we actually were functioning like at 130 to 150% of our target. And everything was going well. And then on March 13th, the world stopped for us. That's the time when the lockdown started to happen. And it didn't happen because of the government, but a lot of big companies started to realize that this situation was not tenable and that change had to happen. And when the change happened, everybody is in a state of chaos. And immediately, growth strategy and leadership development stopped being important. So if you measure success by the number of billable hours that our advisors could put in, our advisors were not able to put in those hours. Because who wants to allocate 6 hours to a workshop with their leadership team when the business is shutting down, when suppliers are saying we can't send you goods, or when customers say we're not going to pay you? So the world came to a stop. We immediately launched a task force that Dwight mentioned earlier. And I was fortunate to be asked to chair this task force. And the task force was to find different solutions to help support our clients. So I'd like to tell you that number one, the whole purpose of us doing this pivot, and we called it Project Pivot, was to help our clients and to help support the CEOs during this time of uncertainty, when they were being thrown questions and problems on issues that they never had to deal with ever before. So that was our number one goal. How can we support the CEO? But there was a secondary benefit that came out. And obviously that one is a little bit selfish, but we were actually able then, if we have the right solutions, to remain busy and fully engaged and have billable hours. But that certainly wasn't our number one target. We also pride ourselves on having built up a trusted advisor relationship with the CEO, and to have a relationship and to be looked upon as someone that can help through the thick and through the thin. And I think after the last 6 weeks, I could tell you that I think we have even built up that reputation even stronger. So Project Pivot, our mandate was to develop methodology, solutions, and expertise that would allow our delivery teams to support the CEOs during this whole new world. Next slide, please. We found out through a number of different ways that CEOs had some very specific concerns. And they were none of the concerns that they had at the start of March. But as soon as the lockdown started to happen and the government started to announce programs, we were inundated with questions on how to access these programs. And let me tell you that we have trouble accessing some of the programs from some of the other departments in the federal government as well. We have the same frustrations as the entrepreneurs do. But they ask that. Their thoughts very rightly turn to, how do we manage cash? How do we ensure we have cash to run our business, not only through this period, but actually so that we can actually start up whenever that is? What do we do with our employees? Do we lay them off? Do we send them home? Do we try to operate a virtual business? What do we do? The next one is, how do we communicate with them? What do we tell them? Employees, we know, want assurance that there'll be a paycheck every second Thursday, that they'll still have a job at the end of this. What do we say when we don't know? What do we tell our customers when they're expecting delivery of products so that they can do their own manufacturing? Or what do we say to customers when they don't want the product anymore, but we have a truck or a couple trucks full of product for them? What do we say to our suppliers? How do we as CEOs make hard decisions when these CEOs haven't faced these issues ever before? So these were some of the key questions that drove us as we were developing our solutions. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you this curve because if you just looked at what was happening from a superficial point, it looks like any other slowdown. You're going to have a dip. It's going to go on for a certain period, and then we're going to recover. But here was the challenge that we had. We didn't know how deep the trough was going to be. In most recessions, you could figure out how big the dip's going to be. I agree that in most recessions, we don't know how long the slowdown's going to be, but it's not going to be to such a long period that it scares you. And then number three, how strong will the recovery be? Will it be a straight line up, or will it be a zigzag as wave 2 and wave 3 and wave 4 of COVID hits back? How can we continue to serve as a trusted advisor and support the CEO? That's the big question. And we thought we had to answer these questions. We had certain guiding principles leading our work. The first is, how do we gather and create new IP and then put it into a way that we create solutions that can help our CEOs in a timely fashion? Hey, I was involved right from the start of this program in high impact firms. We took 1.5 years to build the solutions. And now we're being tasked to build new solutions within days or weeks. The next guiding principle is, I mentioned that we had this cadre of some great advisors, executive advisors is what we call them, who are former C-suite people and entrepreneurs. So my question was, how do we leverage off the broad and deep experience of this team to help us create these solutions? So that told me that we had to create a structure that allowed the contributions of many, but to do it in some organized fashion so we didn't get gobbledygook. But we wanted to get people to weigh in on their best practices and share. Next slide, please. Next one. Yeah, thanks. So while we thought that the economic environment looked like one trough, we actually realized that it's actually three different environments, and it required very different solutions for each. So the first environment was obviously crisis management. How can we help provide solutions immediately? The second one was, how do we secure and stabilize the business when they're in the trough? And third, and we had to cross our fingers, but we knew at some point there had to be an upswing, but nobody wanted to hear that from us at the start. But we had to then figure out, how do we put them into a different gear so they can seek opportunity in uncertainty? So we broke everything down into these three sections. And this is what allowed us to start building that structure that people could contribute to. Next slide, please. So we came up with these three pillars. I want to just highlight crisis management. We expected the clients to be in this phase just for a few days, maybe a few weeks. But most certainly, we don't measure time in months. And it's, how do we help the CEOs prioritize and deal with this crisis? And how do we support them in managing in a chaotic and uncertain world? So that's crisis management. So our solutions there were quick. They weren't workshops. They were frameworks. They were top 10 lists. There were things that we could deliver immediately and did not require time. The second pillar was secure and stabilize the business. And we know that they were going to be in the phase for 3 to 9 months. And we wanted to support the CEOs and their leadership teams in securing the business and stabilizing the company in an uncertain economic environment. And once all the crisis issues have been dealt with, how do we focus them on making sure that the business could survive over a period of time? And then the third phase is the seeking opportunity and uncertainty. I don't know when that's going to start, but I know that it's going to take a while to get the businesses going again. But one of the key things we had to do was change their outlook and morale, because we know that after you're in a trough for a period of time, that might be the part that gets damaged the most. And if the CEO and leadership team are not optimistic, there is no way the employees and workers will be. So we have to also develop a way to get them into the right mindset. And we knew that the new normal would happen, that what was important at the start of March might not be as important in May. Maybe the definition of the words national security might mean that we don't need to source our goods from China or somewhere else when it came to respirators, masks, and personal protective equipment. And maybe those become part of our national security, just like food supply and water. And maybe that creates opportunities for businesses to develop. Or on the other hand, maybe there are things that we thought were important before that aren't anymore. And what businesses might actually see a downswing forever. So we developed solutions along that. Next slide, please. So let me tell you what crisis management actually meant. And it meant 10 things to us. Compliance. Employees, how do we eliminate uncertainty, keep the morale up? Leadership, how do we make sure leadership operates and leads? How do we provide clarity and security to customers? What kind of a communication plan do we have? Working capital. Companies faced an immediate hit to their cash. And how do we ensure that they can get some more working capital so they can survive for the next phase? And how do we prioritize things? There was a ton of things that appeared to be urgent. And if you think of Eisenhower's 2x2 matrix, where one variable is important and the other variable is urgent, there were a lot of things that were urgent but not important. So how do we help the CEOs flesh through that and triage the important things? Technology, this is very tactical. What kind of technology is required to allow the business to continue? Supply chain, securing supply, and then operations. What do you decide to continue with and what do you decide to let go? So this was all about crisis management. And as I mentioned before, the solutions here had to be developed and delivered within days. The next slide, please. So this is now the second pillar, secure and stabilize the business. And we had 6 areas. Leadership. Is leadership providing clear direction? Building the morale of the team while they're working remotely? Stakeholders. Do we know who can hurt us and who can help us? So we actually had a stakeholder analysis and prioritization exercise. Working capital, again, not just short term, but how do we get through the next 3 to 6 to 9 months? Go back, Dwight, sorry, slide just went. Okay, financing. Given that we're a bank, how do we help them arrange or secure lines of credit that go well beyond the normal type of underwriting? People management, minimum viable operations on the long term. So we worked on that. Customers, which customers matter? Which ones do we have to keep supplying? Access to government resources, communications, a regular tempo to keep morale up. And then this one popped up and was very important, health and wellness. And we've been focusing on how do we help the leadership actually have the right balance between the 6 facets of wellness. Overall financial review of operations, so we have more time. So it's not just an emergency cash. We're focusing on what the important things are for long-term stability and then supply chain. And then finally, on the next slide, these are the seeking opportunity solutions. And the reason I've highlighted some of them in red is we actually ended up combining a bunch of these. But these are now, because we have more time, these were all about workshops, and we actually have a methodology that we're following. So it's much more like our normal consulting and developing strategy. But the number one thing we start with is the wellness. Number 2, we deal with are the changes to the megatrends. And if we understand what the new normal is from the broadest macro standpoint, then it allows us to then start exploring what opportunities there are. And we looked at it from 2 main perspectives. One from customers, saying with all these changes, can we change our value prop and will we be able to attract more customers? And then number 2, from a competitive opportunities section, maybe we could find some weaker companies, acquire them, maybe we could buy market share. And so there's a lot of work done along those 2 parallels. And then there's some work being done on ongoing feasibility. Do companies, after going through this, have to maybe cut off their leg to save the body? Are there operations that need to be discontinued and shuttered? And long-term stable financing, we're working on that right now. So all these solutions in this pillar have been longer ones that take a lot of time to actually plan for. And so it took more time to develop the solution. And now when we deliver it, it takes multiple workshops and meetings. But let me give you an update on how things are. The first two pillars, most of the solutions are all developed now. They've been delivered as well. This pillar, seeking opportunities, are two main solutions, customers and then competitive opportunities. They've been developed, but we're working on a few more things. But we are just in the process of delivering these right now, just starting. And as we're at the end of April, I could tell you that our billable hours for the month of April have not dipped one bit. So we've been able to pivot our solutions and keep our practice strong. And in terms of helping our CEOs and making impact, we've come up with different ways to support them. We've actually put together cohorts of CEOs of about 20 CEOs each, so they can actually talk about CEO problems, CEO issues, and they've gotten huge value from that. So in terms of helping them and supporting them, I think we've done it. And I could also tell you that only out of 150 clients that we had across the country going into this, I think we've had about 3 to 5 cancellations at most. So we've maintained the majority of our client base, about 95% of that. Our billables are consistent, and our clients have felt supported. And I actually think we will have a tighter relationship with our clients going forward than we even did before, and we thought it was pretty darn good then. So Dwight, I'm going to toss it back to you here, and I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for those insights and the 3 pillars, and then digging a little bit more deeply into each of the pillars. I particularly liked your focus on the CEO and the words that you said there around that person being so critical in mid-market companies. And thank you for that. So I have asked everyone if they can type in any questions. I have the first one. Just a couple of other logistic things. There's been lots of good information on the chat. People are talking to each other, so please do check that out. And also all the links to all of our social media channels have been posted inside the chat. So please do check those out. And if you're not yet a member of our LinkedIn group, or if you haven't yet liked our Facebook group, or if you haven't followed our YouTube channel, please do those kinds of things, because we would love to be in contact with you doing those things. And sorry about that one little blip. I was managing the text in the side here, Glenn, and I accidentally used a keyboard command that advanced the slide. I don't know how I did that. I'll have to figure it out so I can replicate it in the future, but there you go. Anyway, that was a great presentation, Glenn. I really appreciated it. The first question we had was from Constantinus. He asked if you could elaborate a little bit in terms of the rebound. Is it going to be V-shaped, U-shaped, or W-shaped? You had mentioned that a little bit during your presentation.
Well, I guess ultimately I'll tell you we don't know, but we are doing a lot of sensitivity analysis. And what we're also hoping to do, along with the seeking opportunities pillar, is also helping them to build a continuity plan at the same time, so that if and when we have a second wave, that they'll be in a better position to deal with it than the first time. And I don't think when you think about change management, I don't think we have to do too much when it comes to awareness and the need for change. I think we're in the right environment, so that's part of our whole plan, is to make sure that they're better prepared the next time. Mm-hmm. If they're not better prepared, then we failed as advisors.
Yes. The second question is about your 3 pillars framework, and this is Padraig is asking the question is whether these are part of a larger overall strategic plan and execution over the next 2 years.
So the majority of our clients prior to the 6 weeks ago in the COVID shutdown, we had helped them develop their growth strategies. So the majority of clients have those right now, and that's actually a 3-year plan. But one of the parts of our new seeking opportunities pillar is that we're looking to review those plans after we determine what the new megatrends and the new normal is. And we are determining whether they fit in the 3 buckets. So one is, yeah, good growth strategy, let's continue on this. 2, it needs some tweaking because some things have changed. Or 3, we got to throw it out and start again. So, the first thing is we're looking at the existing plan and determining like through a triage process what's necessary. And then we'll start to build and flesh out a better plan going forward, one that fits for today.
Okay. You had mentioned in terms of the crisis management part, and we have a question about supply chain. So how do you advise clients in terms of their supply chain, both in terms of managing their costs, but also in terms of making sure that they have the right inputs when they need them?
So Dwight, this is one of the solutions we're just in the midst of developing right now. So I could speak to some of the objectives and the frameworks that we're using, but I can't speak to what the solution is yet. But our number one challenge with supply chain is to battle test it and to find ways to increase the security of it. So whether it's single source supplying, not only from a company standpoint, but also from a country standpoint. And how do you build a diversified supply chain so that even if one country or one supplier gets into trouble, that you still have some form of a supply chain. So our whole process is on how to evaluate and how to battle test and minimize risk.
Okay, thank you very much. This question is from Mehmet. The economic environment, I guess it's more of a comment, but if you'd comment on it yourself, that would be great. The economic environment graphic should not only be for the country, but also for our sector, our company, and so on.
Yes, so we know that every company will be impacted in a whole different way. The recovery for every company will be different depending on where they are. So for example, even in Canada, we have 10 provinces. Every province is opening up their economy in a different way. And there are different lists of what was considered an essential service when the lockdown occurred. Mm-hmm. So by no means can we look at one national or international graph. We have to understand how that company fits in that industry in that region. So we absolutely look at it in that manner.
Wonderful, thank you. Here's a question from Salal. You've described the overall approach in a comprehensive and clear way. Thank you, Glenn. I agree with that. What is your approach to how to capture the learning by the CEO, the advisor, and the other stakeholders, and so on? For example, what kind of workshops, surveys, or so on do you do to track that?
So one of the things that we have, I just briefly touched on it, we have our CEOs organized into cohorts. So CEOs across the country are part of a cohort. The cohorts are closed. You're only allowed to participate in those cohorts if you're assigned to it. So they build up trust amongst themselves. We monitor and organize these cohorts so they can have discussions. We actually have our people on the lines listening and recording their discussions, not from we're going to play it back, but so we understand what their chief concerns are and what kind of feedback they have when it comes to their advisors, how we have helped them. So we have a really good feedback system, and we use that information to help advise us on which of the subtopics we deal with in each of those 3 pillars under the project pivot. And that's why we added health and wellness, because we were hearing that there was a big need, but we never had that in our initial conception of the subtopics.
Glenn, thank you. There are more questions coming in, but I just wanted to relate to you because you won't have had a chance to see, but in the comments, there are much feedback on your session, and the word excellent and amazing seem to be coming up quite a bit. So thank you. There's a lot of thanks coming in from individuals in addition to the questions. This question's from Fernando. The insight provided is excellent. The initial reaction of shock and panic seems to be subsiding currently, and now we're facing concerns of time. So the longer these lockdowns are in place, the deeper the trough. And that's going to translate into a longer slowdown and a slower rise to recovery. I think our business model must be changed and restricted for a new norm to completely rethink. Different sectors will be affected differently. So I guess for you to comment on his comment.
Yeah, I agree fully, and I don't think it's just sectors. I think it's countries. I think at least here in North America, despite the fact that we have different countries, the power of communication allows us to see what the U.S. is doing. They see what we're doing in Mexico and all that. And with the U.S. being a real leader in terms of pushing the opening of their economy, it gives us a chance to watch and learn. And I think there'll be a lot of learning if you monitor the leading countries who are opening up, or the leading regions. And I think maybe being a follower is not a bad thing at this point. I always like learning from other people's either mistakes or successes. And who knows what it's going to be from some of these early states that are opening up. But I think we can learn a lot from that, and there will be a new normal. But the quicker we can understand what that is, and then create a framework and operate within it, I think the better. I see this not too different from an athletic sporting event. When there are certain rules, so when you're playing the game of football, American football, you need to know whether you're playing in the US football or Canadian football. Because even though the games look the same, there's a different size field. There's different numbers of players on the field. The goalposts are at different places. The size of the field, I think I mentioned, is different. And there's a different number of downs. So even though from the superficial, it looks like it's the same game, it's a very different game. And the only way you learn is by monitoring the leaders and then trying to take some learnings away from that.
Thank you, Glenn. I have some follow-up questions. Two are about the diversification of supply chain. This first one from Zakir. How do you think that this solution is effective for export-oriented industries linked to the global supply chain?
Well, Zakir, I think global supply chain is going to be a term that has an asterisk behind it. And I think maybe I don't want to say for the first time, but maybe for the first time in a real major way, the word country risk means something now. Mm-hmm. And I think even between the US and Canada, many of you have not heard about this, but the US has a company called 3M, which you might be familiar with. They manufacture the N95 masks. And they had shipments going to Germany, up to Canada, to Mexico. And the Trump government actually stopped those shipments from going. Here are countries that have established, like for example, 3M Canada's head office is in the city where I live right now. And they used to manufacture a lot of things, but they actually have outsourced a lot of things. And now when there's the potential of a very important PPE that can't leave the US, that changes the whole definition of sourcing and risk. And here's the irony. Where do you think the pulp and paper to make those masks came from? They came from Canada. So even though we have the raw material, the finished product, there's risk in that supply chain. So I think it completely has changed, and I think there will be a new normal, and I think it'll create opportunities for domestic companies.
This question from John Tracy is an extension of that, and it's talking about alternative suppliers. So you discover the need, but then you discover that the whole world is seeking the same alternate suppliers. So don't you need to have a strategy in place prior to the problem?
If you had the strategy in place before the problem, I would tell you have the best crystal ball I've ever seen. I could tell you that when we used to do our megatrend section of our external environment analysis, if we ever put in a megatrend saying global pandemic and shutdown of industries and business worldwide, people would look at us like we had two heads. Now, if you did figure that out, my hat's off to you. But if you're in the case where you haven't figured that out and now you have to deal with it, I think it talks about domestic opportunity. And I could tell you that I think within our 150 clients, there's been about 10 to 15 who have actually done a pivot and they now produce PPE. So whether it's masks, shields, ventilators, hand sanitizer, I actually have a source through our own clientele now. And it's amazing how fast you could retool an auto parts manufacturer that made injection molded plastic parts to make face shields. And I just saw some examples of it and was speaking with the CEO the other day. I think it's fantastic. And we have another client that developed a new valve for a ventilator that actually makes the manufacturing of ventilators possible by many more companies. And this valve is one of the key things within the ventilator. And they have produced all the prototypes on 3D printers. It's just been amazing. The ingenuity and innovation and R&D of some of our entrepreneurs is fantastic.
That's excellent. This next question from Kaylee is going back to your discussion about the CEO cohorts. She'd like to know a bit more about that, if you can, in terms of how often they meet, what kind of an agenda do they have, how long are the meetings?
So the cohorts were established when we had we have a program that's part of our whole growth driver program called the Leadership Retreats, and every CEO goes on that. We also have a second program called Second in Command. And so they get to send anywhere from 1 to 6 people on the second in command. And they go through I'm going to say formalized education program, but we never use those terms. It's really an experiential learning experience. And they are put into cohorts at that time. So the cohorts start with a face-to-face. And that is so powerful because they establish relationships. So what we've done is we've now translated the face-to-face cohorts into virtual cohorts. They're cohorts of about 20 people, 20 CEOs. They meet on average, they get to choose, but on average they meet bi-weekly. They meet for about 2 hours. And we have 2 people from the cohort that serve as co-CEOs. So they get to pick the agenda items and the topics. If they left it to us to pick, we picked the wrong issues. Mm-hmm. We need to make this for them and about them, and all we do is the logistics behind it, and we monitor it. So it's, in terms of number of agenda or discussion items, I think most of them probably go through about a half a dozen topics, and they all weigh in and share, and the sharing is just fantastic. It's one of the most heartening things that I've seen during this crisis. It's how people are willing to help each other.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. This is a question from Joseph, and I'm actually going to ask this question of the entire group. Glenn, you may comment on it if you'd like, but I think it's to all of us. So please use your chat boxes to answer this one. And he's asking, what can we learn, or what is possible for us to learn from each other in terms of this people business, and being that we're based in the Americas and Europe. So from the perspective of ICMCI, we're always asking ourselves that question. So if you can make suggestions about future topics where we can share information and learn from each other, please do that in the chat box, and Rima and I can look at this and see how we can build additional sessions on that specifically. Any insights you want to add to that, Glenn, since you're our expert on the floor right now?
No, I'd actually love to hear what other people think.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent exchange. They like your analogy to U.S. and Canadian football. I thought that was actually quite helpful as well. Business strategies. The solution covered each and every element important to business strategy. So this is a thank you from Zakir about a very good delivery and it being very helpful in terms of this. From Fernando, do you believe we could see a more national economy versus a global economy and reduced global reliance in the future?
Yeah, I think international free trade, international trade. Let me back up rather than getting to free trade. I think the definition is going to be changed. And I think there will be protected industries. I think the definition of national security will change a lot of things. But I do still believe that the whole benefit of international trade and comparative advantage is one of the most important principles that we operate by. But I do think that countries will protect themselves going forward. And that, again, I need to always twist this back into what opportunities mean. And I think it means there's going to be a lot more opportunity.
Thank you very much. We're coming down to the last few minutes, and now what I would appreciate is if everyone could turn on their cameras. Rima will arrange to take a screenshot so that we can, on our social media, share what a great session this was and get a lot of smiling faces on the screen. And Glenn, while we're doing this, I'll ask you to gather your thoughts for any closing comment. There may have been you may have been inspired by some of the questions to say something that you didn't cover in your main presentation. So here we are for the screenshot. So everybody smile and look at the camera. Okay, that was one screen. Now we'll have to wait because there's at least 2 screens full of people. So we can relax our smiles. But if you're on the second screen, time for a big smile. Oh yeah, lots more smiles here.
Just give me a second. I need to do the first 1 second.
Okay.
Second done.
Second screen, great. The things we do for social marketing as management consultants. Oh, there, Rima, I see you on the third screen, on my third screen.
Just give me 1 second. Now the third. The chat keeps coming in and it ruins the photo, but now it's clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you all for those nice, bright smiles. Oh, hi, Brenda. Hi there. Oh, look at all the smiling faces. Hi. So Glenn, any closing comments for us before we wrap up?
I'd like to make 2 points. And the first point is, I think it's so easy during a time like this for people to be focused on the negative. And I think there's so much coming at the CEOs and the leadership teams that it's all bad news. And I think our role as consultants is to actually help them see the future. And if we help them adopt a positive, optimistic outlook, even in the middle of a crisis where everything appears bad, I think we would have helped a ton. The whole definition of a leader is on how to lead people to help you accomplish your goal. So I think leadership is tied directly to that outlook. So for us, if we help our clients focus on the opportunities part, and we make sure the CEOs and leaders realize how important their role is in this, I think we've done a great service.
Wonderful. Those are amazing words to end on. I thank you very much for that, Glenn. And I thank you for sitting in the hot seat. It's not easy to take questions from a group of management consultants from around the world and to answer them as eloquently as you did. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your preparation for this meeting and sharing this excellent information with us. Thank you. And thank you to all of the participants that joined us. We topped out at 78. Some have left us now already because we are just 1 minute past the hour. And I thank you all for joining us. And please do check out the CMC Global website. All of our events are listed there. And every week, Thursday at this time, these two times, in the morning and the afternoon Europe time, we will have these webinars going forward for the foreseeable future. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day, whatever time zone you're in.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.